We're in the middle of a dialogue between Parigha, a Persian king, and Suraghu, the king of a tribe of blonde people in the foothills of the Himalaya. And Parigha is what we could describe as a traditional yogi. And the yogi is very much concerned with focusing the mind and achieving what we could call a higher state of consciousness, which here is described as Samadhi. It's that state of supreme peace in which no thoughts or notions arise in the mind. Samadhi is a term which has got lots of shades of meaning. Right Samadhi is one of the limbs of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. It's usually translated as right concentration. Here meditation is understood as concentration. It's about focusing the mind on an object. It could be the breath or something else, or a mental image, or even a physical image. And through this concentration, higher states of consciousness are realized. These are outlined in detail in the Buddhist tradition and in the yogic tradition as well. I was asked once about meditation, and the person that was asking me didn't know anything about meditation, and her comment was that she couldn't possibly make her mind go blank. She didn't know anything about meditation, but that was the impression she had. It was about making the mind go blank. And if you look at Parigha's understanding, the supreme peace in which no thoughts or notions arise in your mind, then it seems to be a fairly reasonable impression to have. But let's see what Suraghu's got to say, his understanding of Samadhi. Suraghu said, "Holy Sir, please tell me this. Why is only that state of mind which is free from thoughts and notions called Samadhi? If one is a knower of truth, whether he be engaged in constant action or in contemplation, does his mind ever lose the state of Samadhi? No. The enlightened ones are forever in Samadhi, even though they engage themselves in the affairs of the world. On the other hand, one whose mind is not at peace does not enjoy Samadhi by merely sitting in the lotus position, the lotus posture. And not simply by merely sitting in the lotus posture, but by performing the concentration exercises which lead to higher states of consciousness." So it seems to me that Suraghu's having a little dig at the yogic idea of Samadhi here. Higher states of consciousness do not necessarily have anything to do with truth. Doing your concentration exercise is a way of developing your mind, of training your mind, which is all well and good, but it's got nothing to do with realization of the truth. The yogi who's sitting there, cross-legged, in a state of Samadhi, at some point is going to have to get up and go about the business of his bodily needs. He's going to have to eat a bit, wash, whatever. And then what's happened to his Samadhi? You can't really do these concentration exercises in the normal course of your daily life. So Suraghu is bringing in the understanding that true Samadhi is about knowing the truth, which is the truth of what is happening right now, and it's the truth of self-knowledge. Knowledge of truth, Lord, is the fire that burns up all hopes and desires as if they are dried blades of grass. And that is known by the word Samadhi, not simply remaining silent. So knowledge of truth is about realization of the immediate reality, and that burns up all hopes and desires. In other words, it burns up our latent tendencies, our psychological tendencies which take us away from this awareness. That is known as the state of Samadhi, in which there is eternal satisfaction, clear perception of what is, egolessness, not being subject to the pairs of opposites, freedom from anxiety and from the wish to acquire or to reject. From the very moment of the dawn of self-knowledge, the state of Samadhi becomes permanent in the sage. He does not lose it, neither is it interrupted, even for a moment. Even as time does not forget to move on, the man of self-knowledge does not forget the self. Even as a material object is forever material, the sage of self-knowledge is forever a sage of self-knowledge. So, the sage never loses it. I think it's worth understanding what's meant here by the dawn of self-knowledge. I've often spoke about the initial realization of truth. And after that, it is possible to lose that realization because you've got your psychological tendencies which distract you from the awareness that that initial realization brought. So I think we have to understand self-knowledge here in both aspects of what's meant by self. Self-knowledge refers to knowledge of the self, and that self is usually self with a capital S. It's a self which has got nothing to do with the personal identity. So there's the realization of that self, there's knowledge of that self in the sense of realization. But you've also got to be aware of your psychological tendencies which distract you or detract you from that realization of your transcendental self. And when you practice the first self-knowledge, realization of the transcendental self, that is what burns up your hopes and desires, your psychological tendencies. And once that process has got a certain momentum, then we can call that the dawn of self-knowledge. And then the sage will never lose that awareness. The sage can come back to it whenever they want. So they get on with their business, which might mean turning the attention to whatever they're doing, but then they come back to it. They can then rest in that self-knowledge. Hence, I am awakened now, pure, at peace within myself, and in a state of Samadhi. How can it be otherwise? How can there be anything other than the self? When at all times and in all ways the self alone is all in all, how can there be a state other than Samadhi? And what can be termed Samadhi? In other words, we're not concerned here with higher states of consciousness. Suraghu is saying, how can there be a state other than Samadhi? We don't need to worry about the different higher states of consciousness as outlined by the yogis or the Buddhists. All we are concerned with is Samadhi, which is consciousness. There's only consciousness. There cannot be any other state. Parigha said, surely, O king, you have attained total enlightenment. You shine radiant with bliss, with peace, with sweetness and with purity. In you there is no ego sense, desire or aversion.